welcome everyone to our virtual panel today, Fueling Innovation with DEI. Thank you so much for being part of the magic. We're really excited to bring together a great panel discussion for you today. Here is our agenda as follows. We'll start off with some housekeeping, go into some introductions, and then dive deep into the panel discussion. Afterwards, we'll have Q&A from the audience and then a wrap up. Women in Cleantech and Sustainability fosters an influential network of professionals to further the roles of women in the growing green and blue economy to make a positive impact on the environment. We have monthly events in person and virtual, our annual mentorship program, and our new entrepreneurship circle, our eCircle series. We have our WCS Talks TED Style conference, which happens annually, and we'll be releasing more information as that progresses. Here are some upcoming events that might be of interest to you. Our eCircle, our last one of the year, will be on March 17th. March 4th, we'll be having a WCS cleanup day at 4 various locations in San Jose, Los Angeles, Phoenix, and Denver. March 9th will be our reverse pitch competition, and March 23rd will be our sustainable healthcare. We have a book club as well, so April 6th will be our book club, and we will be reading Speed and Scale. So please stay posted for virtual events, in-person happy hours. We have a lot of great events for this year. Some Zoom etiquette and virtual networking tips. Remember to unmute and mute yourself appropriately. Please share your video if you can. We'd love to see your smiling faces. Write your full name so people can connect with you on LinkedIn. Share your LinkedIn in the profile in the chat as well. See how many people you can network with today. As a friendly reminder, here's how we like to show up virtually. Respectful for each other and assume best intentions. Be present and an active listener. Take away insights and leave judgment behind. For our membership to learn more about our network, please feel free to scan this lovely QR code. As members of WCS, you will receive access to our WCS event calendar, virtual happy hours, webinars, access to secure virtual networking members list, advanced access to our new job listings, profile on our membership database, annual membership appreciation event, 50% off to WCS Talks, and 30% off student discount on membership. I am so excited to introduce our moderator today, Lorenzo Jones. Lorenzo is a professional executive business coach, speaker, facilitator, trainer, and executive with more than 20 years experience that is solidly grounded in creating a positive learning environment by building a high degree of connection and trust with his clients. Lorenzo has partnered with hundreds of individuals and organizations across the United States, helping C-suite leaders, board members, and teams to reach new levels of achievement. His clients come from government, nonprofit, telecom, financial, transportation, tech, and other industries. They range from Levi Strauss and Nike to the County of Marin and LA Metro. He is a compassionate and intuitive communicator with the ability to truly hear, connect with, and motivate clients. Fear or limiting beliefs can be the biggest barrier to success, says Lorenzo. My passion is unlocking a client's greater potential by helping them identify, break through, and discover new beliefs about themselves. Everyone needs someone cheering on. Thank you so much, and I'm so excited to pass it off to Lorenzo.
Wow, thank you for that great introduction. And I am so excited and happy to be here. And I'm in gratitude to be leading this conversation with these amazing women. And so I could go on and on and on. I talk for a living, but I want you to hear their voices. Currently, what was not mentioned, that I am an associate of Eden Housing here in the Bay Area. I'm the VP of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. And if you may or may not know, we build, manage, and own affordable housing throughout the state of California. So this conversation that we're having today is meaningful to me on many levels, So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to our amazing panelists that we have that you'll be hearing from. And so first off, I'll start with Sarah Fuentes. Hi, Sarah. Wave your hand so everyone can see you. All right.
Hi, everyone.
All right, Sarah is the founder and president of SmartWise with 10 years of experience in waste and recycling industry. She's a leader in abating commercial waste. She's a passionate advocate for women and a tenacious leader. Sarah is also setting out to alter the clean tech landscape and finding her own niche. She draws on her experience working as an educator and vice chair of Women in Tech and Clean Tech and Sustainability, this organization. So I'm happy to welcome Sarah to the call, and everyone, whatever you do, just give a little wave or shout, a salute to Sarah. Welcome, Sarah. Next up, Keely DeWitt. Keely is VP of Marketing and Public Policy at GAF Energy. She comes with a ton of solar experience with the conviction that carbon neutral is the new black. Love that. She started in renewable as the head of marketing for the largest solar company in the Northeast before moving into marketing and public policy leadership roles at Sunrun and SunPower. As the national organization director of the Alliance for Solar Choice, Fortune magazine described the net roots where she pioneered as a radically changing and political advocacy through digital technology. That's quite a bit. Prior to joining GAF Energy, she served as head of marketing at Mosaic. So Keely, big round welcome. Thank you for joining us. And next up, Jerry Taylor. Hi, Jerry. Jerry is the director of diversity and career pathways, Project Learning Tree, and Sustainable Forestry Initiative. Jerry leverages successful tools and resources to build and support programs for diverse young people as they navigate green careers. She leads the Career Pathways Programming, the Green Mentor Program, and the Green Jobs Employer Training efforts. So thank you, Jerry, so much for what you do. She also supports the Chief Sustainability and Diversity Officer and diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts across all SFI pillars. And we're happy to have you with us as well, Jerry, from, I believe, North Carolina. So you're all the way across the country. And that's the beauty of this call, is that it's international. We have many of you from all over, not just the country, but across the pond and across the world. So thank you all for being here. So without further ado, shall we dive into some great questions? You know, I'm particularly interested in many questions, but I'd love to start off with asking our panelists some of these topics that I think are near and dear to all of our hearts. And that is, how do you specifically overcome some of the barriers that you've had to overcome in this industry? And specifically as a woman, or specifically as a Black or brown woman in green space. And so I would love to know, and I'm sure everyone else would love to hear, what were the opportunities? What were the challenges and struggles and barriers that you had to overcome that might be meaningful for the group here? And so, Sarah, I'd love to have you start off, and then Keely, if you could jump in as well, and then Jerry, I'd love to hear from you.
I just want to say thanks for asking that question. It's really kind of been, since we've been having this conversation around what was opportunities that I've experienced, and also the challenges that I've had to overcome and deal with in being a Native American brown woman in the waste and recycling industry, which it happens to be very much a white male dominated industry. The first thing that I would say was getting comfortable with kind of projecting myself, and also getting comfortable with my own voice being heard in a room with full of men, and how I would position myself in a conversation. I would say that was actually one of the biggest barriers that I still kind of struggle with at times when I'm going to an industry-focused conference. There's, once again, there's not a lot of brown Native American women that are in a position of ownership or leadership. So I tend to be one of the only individuals in the room, and so I kind of want to find who maybe my allies are. And so I would say that I got really comfortable with making myself uncomfortable and being uncomfortable in these situations. Even like there would be times where I would have to like walk out of the room and like get a hold of myself because I was so nervous or I felt like I was going to throw up on somebody. Not because I was like, it was just because of that uncomfortable feeling of knowing like, am I going to be accepted? Are they really going to hear what I have to say? And so that I have to say that that is still something that I go through at industry conferences. And I've gotten really comfortable with knowing that I have a power. I've accepted that I hold power. I've accepted that what I know about our industry and what experience I've had in the industry, that it doesn't, it's not negated just because of my gender or my race. It's actually, I feel like it's more empowered because I'm then able to be an example for people that look like me, and that maybe come from the demographic, social demographic that I came from, because I came from, my parents were 16 and 17 when they had me. So once again, that kind of could potentially breed a different level of insecurity. So definitely I would say is getting comfortable with my voice and acknowledging my voice in the industry that I'm in has been the opportunity that I've been given. And now that I'm comfortable with it, I'm excited about it and I'm unapologetic about it. So
Beautiful.
that's my thought.
There was a lot in there. And one of the items I took away was being uncomfortable and being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Right, acknowledging that. Beautiful, Sarah. Keely, how about you?
I do really love that, being comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think that's how we have these conversations and how we come to our own power too, recognizing what is important and where our edges are. And when you start to feel that discomfort, that's where the juicy stuff starts to happen, right? That if we just sit back and we feel good about everything that's going on, given the context that we're in and the world that we exist in, that's when I start to get nervous, when people say everything is fine. And so, I think for me, I resonate so deeply with the idea of kind of being and only in the room as a queer woman, but recognizing my white privilege within that. Your question was specifically about brown and Black folks in green spaces. A part of my journey has been very much about figuring out how to be a good ally and leveraging my race and the position of privilege that I sit in within that to further the voices and open up and uplift and work together, as opposed to stepping into a dominant position within that. So learning when to shut up and learning when to listen has been really, really, really important across the board, listening internally, but then also to the voices in the room that may have even less volume given the structures that we're embedded within, and the commitment and responsibility that I have within that, in addition to furthering my own understanding of my identity and role and contributions that I can make as a woman and gender diverse person within these spaces. And I will say, to be perfectly honest about it, it's so incredible to hear Sarah say that she has fully embraced her power and really feels that and stands within that. I think I continue to be on a journey of getting there, right? I think I still apologize for myself a lot. I think I still make myself small and step back and let the really dominant voices step in and take that space that they assume is rightfully theirs. And so every day really working to stand within power, and events like this and conversations like this really help to encourage me and to encourage other people to continue to amplify our voices and other really critical voices. If we're going to accomplish what we need to accomplish within clean energy and sustainability, we need voices like Sarah's, like Jerry's, like Lorenzo's, like all of the people on this call and all of the people who care about this issue, to be able to move forward in a way that will actually be sustainable and create long-term solutions.
Wow, Keely, I don't know, but I heard your voice. You have your voice,
It's
right?
there.
I think
Yes.
everyone all can attest to the fact that we hear you and we see you. So thank you. Jerry, how about you?
I would like to say similar to Sarah. I come from a background of education and public health and counseling. And so the experience of stepping into the forestry and conservation sector has been very interesting to me, with only less than 3% African-American representation in that space. And so most of the times when I go to conferences, I'll be honest, no one speaks to me for the first 2 days or 3 days until I get on stage, and then everybody wants to talk to me. And so having to deal with sometimes being looked at as the help and not losing courage. And so what has helped me deal with that barrier, and I'm sorry I'm getting teary about it because it's challenging, but how I've dealt with that barrier is build relationships. And I found other people that look like me, the allies that uplift voices like mine. I think that coming from such a different space where I will always say, like, when I break it down to my friends in counseling, I'm like, counseling, we're probably like the early 1990s, public health were in the 2000s, forestry going back to the 50s. And so really having those hard conversations, and one conversation that I had that was really helpful for me to learn about this space was, I was talking about the work that we're doing at SFI and working with Black and Brown youth, and a woman had spoke to me about having friends of color and having colored friends specifically. And I think a lot of people would have been mad about that conversation, but it was the most enlightening conversation that I could have had with this individual. And what ended up coming out of that conversation was I was able to share with her, like, I understand you're one of the earliest women in forestry, and she was a Caucasian woman. I said, but when I walk in the door, people see Black first. I don't even get to acknowledge my femininity at all because my color trumps that. And from that conversation, I remember going to my CEO and saying, like, do not fire her. She's the best person ever. If you do, I'll hire her myself. But it was one of those moments where someone could have actually taken that conversation and been very offensive. But I use that as a teaching and learning moment. And I think that that's what's really helped me break down barriers, is actually showing, like Sarah said, that there is a space for multiple people in this sector. And I understand my role is to be, again, unapologetically Black, but also to make sure that I keep a door open and a space open for a person behind me. And so literally I'm just showing up, doing the best job that I can because I want other youth to have the same opportunity as me.
Wow. Did you see the hearts that flew up there, Jerry, for you? As we dive into these conversations, I cannot help but to acknowledge that it's also vulnerable, and to be sharing in this space in this way on this little box called Zoom really takes for me courage and commitment. And so I just want to acknowledge the vulnerability of sharing what your experience has been, because I think all of us have had those experiences. And so I just want to acknowledge that, Jerry. Thank you so much. And to you, Sarah and Keely. So the next question I have is, what are the solutions? What are you specifically working on to help? And I think I just heard a little bit from you, Jerry, to help create the pathways for those following behind you or marching next to you or perhaps in front of you. What specific strategies are you implementing that might be helpful to the listeners? So Keely, if you could lead us off in this discussion, and then I'll come to you, Sarah, and then Jerry.
Yeah, I'd like to pull a thread that Jerry started to weave is, I love that phrase of, looking for who's coming behind you, right? So thinking about showing up with our full selves, and trying to authentically embody all of who we are in the jobs that we do and the ways that we engage, but constantly be thinking about how are we positioning other people for success. I happen to have a team of entirely female and gender diverse people that I've hired, not intentional. I get made fun of for it within my company, honestly. But it, I think it's because I've been able to create an environment where a variety of different people feel comfortable. And we do make each other uncomfortable sometimes too, and challenge assumptions and those kinds of things. But I think setting the example and constantly thinking about how you mentor and make resources available for people who are coming up in their careers, and who are asking the same questions that you may be asked previously. So staying open to mentorship opportunities, connecting with organizations like Women in Cleantech and Sustainability, connecting with Black engineers and clean power, like making sure that you are paying it forward. And in addition to actively creating the environments within your organization where you have influence, where people feel like they can grow, even if they don't fit the fill in the blank expected demographics and identities for what those roles look like.
Beautiful. Thank you. Sarah?
So I was thinking about, how with the strategy. And for when I started Smart Waste, the thing for me, which is still very, very important, is the value system that I hold. And so any customer or any vendor that I work with, I'm communicating them my value systems: transparency, circularity, and people. And so my strategy is around being very vocal with people up front about my value system, and then asking them directly, are you in alignment with me? Because if you're not, I really don't want to do business with you. I don't want to spend time with you. I don't want to help your business because you or your value systems are not in alignment with my value system. So my strategy is around being very intentional around my value systems. And also anyone within WCS also is aware of how vulnerable I leave myself. I leave myself very vulnerable. And and part of it is because I understand being the oldest sibling of my siblings are 7, 9, and 11 years younger than me. Okay, so I'm like their second mom, right? That I also understood this aspect of being a leader and the things that oftentimes that I get to model. I don't have to do anything. I get to do it. And that's like the other part of my strategy that I communicate to WCS is, hey, everybody, we don't have to save the planet. We don't have to do this. We get to. And I also look at it at the privilege as like, this is my right. For the fact that I am a mom, I'm a single mom, my son's 13 years old. I'm also a caregiver, which a lot of people may know this. I'm advocating not just for myself, but I'm also communicating these things, humanizing me. I'm making myself a human, not just a businesswoman. So then the people that I'm working with, when I have a crappy day, or I'm having an emotional time, or I'm not able to show up at my best self, they understand and they're not, Sarah's a human being. She's not a super robot, no AI here, right? So I would say my strategy is to set your intentions and communicate your value system. And then be very blatant and ask people, are you in alignment with it? And if you are, great, we could do business together. And if not, no harm, no foul. I'm just not going to waste my time, energy, or money in investing in you. So that's kind of my strategy around being an example and a model in this space, and being very, as I mentioned, upfront about those and asking, are you in alignment? What can we do to get you in alignment? Even if you have questions, we could talk about it. And where are those? Where's the gray area? If there's a gray area, let's get in that gray area a little bit.
Wow, that's beautiful. I don't know about you, but I'm like charged up and ready to go based on what you just said. And so there's two things that you mentioned that I hold dear, and that's value systems and value statements, right? And sometimes we expect people to know what our values are, and it's not until there's conflict, and it's usually around values, right? So stating, communicating your values is an invitation to let others in. And the same with get to versus have to. Get to is a choice. Have to is a burden. It's like if you have kids and you're telling your kids you have to go do this, and the head is swinging, and but to get to, when you say you get to go outside and play, there's cheers. So there's a distinction around those two conversations, isn't there? Jerry, let's hear from you.
So the beauty of the organization I work with, I'm over career pathways, but it's twofold. So this year we did a lot of work. Last year I was doing conferences on just awareness of the issue. And this year we came out with a recent publication paying homage to Carolyn Finney called Black Faces in Green Spaces, The Journeys of Black Professionals in Green Careers. And what I loved about this project is it was very intentional. We created our own committee of Black foresters and conservationists. All of our photos, people featured in the guide, content that was written was done by Black people, because we wanted to make sure that we gave back to the community. One of the things that was important to me was that if I say to you that we have these statements in our DEI statements, is that we're actually doing what those statements say. So if we're saying we're going to work with this population, then that means we work with this population. If we sign up for a partnership with that population, then what does that look like? What does that mean when we say partnership? Because sometimes at national levels, things get we got to check a box, we're doing this, we're doing that, but actually being intentional with what we're saying that we're going to do. And so one of the beauties that I learned from that project and that I like about this project is twofold. We're helping youth get engaged. They're learning about the challenges that they can experience, because that was brought up in the interview questions. But the other piece of this is that we're taking the transcripts and we're going to train actual companies that use our standards and certifications. Because it's important that you hear from the people who are in your industry that you sit at the table with every day. These are the exact challenges that they are having. And so we're actually creating the full pipeline, because that's where one of the issues are, is like, especially in the forest sector, having to talk about the history, but also addressing that lynching did occur in America, forests are not safe, and we cannot negate that. So that was one piece that I was like, we have to put the history in here. And then we have to make sure we talk about the why. And so that youth understand the why, but also the industry understands the why of like why these voices need to be at the table, because they are the most impacted. And so for me, it's like exposure, partnering, but educating. Like we have to educate people on these issues with diversity. And I love what Sarah said. I'm just like you at work. I'm very vulnerable. I tell people the truth about my experiences. If I notice a microaggression is occurring, I'm asking questions because I want to know where that's coming from. Because I think it is important that people understand the lenses that you bring to work. And we all have different lenses based on how you're raised. Like my mom was a single parent. I shared a room with her my senior year. College, I had to find money to go there. So that's my lens. Maybe everybody else's lens are not like that. But what I want people to understand is that the lens of the organization is that everybody belongs, and there's a way to be respectful and everybody's valued for their talents. And so for me, that's what I want to instill in the employees and anybody that really talks to me, is that everybody has a right to be at work. Everybody has a right to come to their job without anybody bothering them about their attributes. So that's my job. That's what I'm trying to do this time.
Wow, you wove a lot of great conversations in there, and you're taking my questions away from me that I have teed up for you. But that's beautiful. And one of the items that I think you're all speaking to, which I would love to just hear from each one of you briefly, is how important to you is vulnerability in this space? What does that mean to you? Is it good, bad? How do you hold that? And how do you champion it while you're experiencing it? And so if you could just maybe briefly I'll swing back around Jerry, then I'll Keely, and then Sarah. If you could just answer that piece, because it's important for everyone to understand what that really means from your lens.
So for me, vulnerability means accepting how people see you in this real world. And you have to acknowledge that and being able to speak to that. And also, like, being okay that some of these conversations are hard and you may cry, but also acknowledging for me that I also need safety support systems. I also need self-care. So this is a job that requires you to be vulnerable all the time. And sometimes you don't want to talk about race. It's been a rough day. You've seen the news, race is always coming up. Sometimes you're just not in that space and you don't want to be the whisperer of all Black and brown groups. So that can be challenging as well. But I think for me, vulnerability is the only way that we're going to get to where we need to go in the space of DEIB work. Because it's based on stories, and storytelling is a great way to make people like human, you know what I'm saying? Because we see all these concepts about Black people on the news, brown people on the news. We don't see the human in that person, but when you're vulnerable, you get to hear the empathy, you get to hear their experience, and that kind of changes the way that you see people and interact with people.
Beautiful.
And so that's how I look at that.
Thanks, Jerry. Keely?
I think sharing your own vulnerability invites other people to share theirs too. I think you have to do it in a way where you're taking some amount of ownership for the ways you might be contributing to the situation too, and looking closely at the dynamic. I think as white people, we have to be careful not to weaponize our vulnerability, and to get caught up in guilt, and and then continue to make the conversation about us as opposed to about the challenges, struggles, and very, very real threats that our Black and brown brothers and sisters experience in the world and in the workplace. And so, I think that vulnerability is critical, but I think you have to do it in an examined way, especially if you're coming from a place of privilege, and recognizing your contributions and how people are perceiving you too, and what kind of benefits and advantages you have often to be more vulnerable and to have that vulnerability be okay, and to be seen maybe as strength as opposed to further sign of your weakness. So I think an examined vulnerability is really important.
Beautiful. Thanks, Keely. Sarah?
So I'm going to say this, that I have a confession, which is I have had an unconscious bias towards people that don't necessarily look like me. And that made it kind of challenging at times to be vulnerable around them. Okay. As I mentioned in the beginning of our conversation, I got comfortable being uncomfortable. And I accepted that some of that lens that I saw everyone at was propaganda, was not necessarily truth. Some of it was based on, we pick up on body language very well. We could tell if spirit says that this is not for us, this person's not for us or not. But I will say, and I'm just going to be very transparent here, that I've had some unconscious biases around, people that don't necessarily look like me, which has caused a challenge to be vulnerable around individuals. And so what I've done is I've given myself permission, and I asked them permission. And sometimes I do it very candidly, where I ask them permission. Do I have permission to speak to you candidly? Just like that. And then I'm going to let you have it because you just said yes. So that I could be as vulnerable as humanly possible because I was just given permission. And so I would say that I really strive to come and show up as my authentic self. And sometimes that is a broken individual, and sometimes that is a very well put together, strategic minded individual. And so I will say that at times, depending on who we are around, what position we hold in the room, will determine the level of vulnerability that we allow ourselves to be. it's a little bit different being in a room where you're the leader, where I have to say, okay, there's certain things that I want my team to know about me. And then there's certain things that I have to pick and choose because I know human nature. Okay, and the human nature, we tend to be critical. We tend to go to the less positive building up side. So I also am mindful of that because I know human nature. Now, do I think that my team wants to be critical and tear me down? No, because they want to be my team if that's the case, right? So, because luckily I get to choose my team. Now, I just think, though, vulnerability allows, just like Keely said, allows other people to be vulnerable. And then that's when we're able to really have the breakthroughs that we are looking to have where, hey, her team, they may be diverse, but I bet you anything their team's going to make a lot of money or have a big impact because of that diversity that's there. That's the thing that I was thinking about. I was like, oh, yeah, her team's going to be the biggest money-making team in the room. But that's just what I was thinking. So vulnerability for me allows that growth to take place, allows those unconscious barriers and biases to come down. Otherwise, I wouldn't say, hey, I'm a little timid of you because you're, or whatever idea I have in my head about this culture, right?
Wow. That was beautiful from all of you. And one of the pieces that I took away from what you just said, Sarah, was that we all have biases, conscious or unconscious. It's then what do we do with that unconscious or conscious biases? And one of the first steps is to acknowledge that I have a bias about this. Not good, bad, right, or wrong, unless it's harmful, but acknowledging it so that others get to witness and see and hear that that is perhaps a barrier. And so that's where the humanization comes into place, right? And so when you allow others to see you, then they get to do something with that, right? So you're surrendering in that conversation. So very, very, very beautiful. So one last question for all of you. If you could give the audience one or two tips of what they can do as solutions or what they can do to achieve not your goals, but what would be helpful for them to achieve their goals, what would it be? What's your one or two tips? And I'll start with you, Sarah, and then Keely, and I'll end with Jerry, and then we'll open it up for questions.
So I will say two tips, okay? The first thing I will say is it's important to do a little bit of self-reflection and evaluation. So before we start to try to solve all, a bunch of issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and gender bias, and wanting all this equality, first let's see, hey, that's where I had to start. Was like, and that's why I was able to confess, hey, I have this unconscious bias, right? Because I did an evaluation of myself, and I had to look to see how many, friends do I have that don't look like me, right? Or that don't look like my son's dad. And so these are the questions that I had to ask myself. And I'll be honest with you, there wasn't a whole lot, like, and maybe one or two. So, that's the first thing is, hey, do I have a diverse group of friends? Am I open to new cultures and learning about them and asking questions about them? Getting comfortable with asking questions around, different genders, different races, different religions, and it's okay to have curiosity. It's not bad to have curiosity. It's just about the approach, right? So first and foremost, I would say, hey, let's do a little self-evaluation. The second thing I will say is practicing your voice, practicing speaking up. practicing asking questions when normally maybe you wouldn't ask a question. I ask questions, often a lot of questions, obvious questions that may not be obvious to me, but I don't know the answer and I need help clarifying. So I ask clarifying questions. And so similar to what Jerry said about microaggression is saying, hey, you know, and asking questions I think is important, and practicing. Practicing even with, you know, your friends and family about conversations that you might think that are hard. I've practiced conversations with my mom who's in HR, and she has to have hard conversations sometimes. And I was like, Mom, what do you think about this? What do you think is appropriate about this? And so really having these kind of real life conversations with people that you also feel comfortable with, right? Being your unapologetic self and having that safe space. So the two tips I was going to say is just do a self-evaluation. Once you do that and you realize, okay, this is what I know about myself, then start practicing with people that you already feel safe with, and then venturing out to people maybe that you are going to make yourself a little comfortable being uncomfortable with.
Beautiful. That's where growth occurs. Thank you, Sarah. Jerry.
You're muted.
I figured that out. It's so hard sometimes. It always happens. But I definitely think self-awareness is where you have to start. So I'm thankful you said that, Sarah. And I also feel like putting yourself in uncomfortable places, because people of color are always in uncomfortable places, or those who are disenfranchised or minority groups are placed in situations that are not always that comfortable. And one of the things that I did was I was in college and I took an LGBTQIA class. And I will be honest, that was the first time. Yes, I was the only person in there that was straight. And that whole experience changed my whole entire life, because everything I knew the world is being was not the way that the world was. And so it had me challenge religion. Like, I was asking my mama questions like, how do you feel about the Bible? Because I come from the Bible Belt, and she's like, it's oppressive. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know you felt that way. But I learned so much by just being around and immersed in a whole nother group, and my level of respect, and just that's where I found myself really being an ally, because if you don't understand people's experience, you definitely cannot speak up. And so I just say, put yourself in situations you've never been in, like go to a Black church, and then assess from there, like, how did I feel being one of the only people there? Because if you don't assess that piece, then you can't really connect with others who have that experience. So I say put yourself in places where, like you said, feel comfortable, uncomfortable. That's the only way that it's gonna work. But that's what I would say as a tip.
Yeah, bravo, Jerry. Keely.
I was thinking, you know, as a communications professional, I was like, what are some like pithy ways I could say? I would say the 2 G's, grace and grit. And it similar to what Sarah and Jerry, you know, in their great wisdom have said. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. You have to enter into conversations and situations that challenge your assumptions and really make you take that good hard look at yourself. And you might hear things that you don't want to hear, but you have to be prepared for that. And that's how we grow. That's how we expand our minds and how we deepen our relationships with ourselves and with the world. And you have to grant yourself grace and other people that grace through that, right? So if you have this sort of mindset of grace, of like, we're all gonna F up. We all have biases. We all have things that, we're all racist in our ways. We're all sexist in our ways. We're all classist in our way. Like, we have all these isms that we're carrying around that we've been steeped in our entire lives. Of course, we're gonna say stupid stuff, and we're gonna say stuff that, comes from a place of ignorance. And unless you're having those conversations and doing them in a way that you're embodying compassion and grace, you're not going to learn the things that you don't know, and you're not going to become, more of a force for good and change in the world. And then the other G, the grit, right? Like sticking with it, like even when it feels ouchy, even when it feels like, oh my gosh, like I'm, their internal self, your recriminations and you're feeling like you're maybe the worst person, or you can't believe you said that, or you can't believe you thought that for so long, right? That like you just have to keep going through, right? You have to keep putting one foot in front of the other and saying, you know, we're gonna get there. We're going, you know, like, and it feels really hard right now, and it feels really like psychologically painful, emotionally painful, interpersonally painful, but it just keep going, right? And believe that you can get there together, and that you can learn, and that we all can do this in our own time, in our own way, and kind of giving each other the benefit of the doubt around that process of just like, if you've got the right intent and you're heading in the right direction, just keep going. And even when the going gets hard, especially if you've got grace through it.
Wow. Wow. So Shivani is going to come on in a moment and maybe share some questions that might be out there. But if I could ask everyone to do this in the chat box, put one word that really inspired you, resonated with you. I mean, I heard grace, grit, ask questions, be uncomfortable, challenge, practice assumptions. What's your one word that you want to throw out in the universe that really landed for you as a meaningful opportunity to share with everyone on this call? Because I'm sure your word will hopefully resonate with someone else. And so just take a moment and throw. I see 37 participants on the call, 37 one-liners, whatever it is. And I just want to invite you all to look at what was written in the chat box. And just take it in. Take in the call that we just had, the words that were spoken, the sentiment, the meanings. What resonated for you? So that when we leave the call, you have one item, one nugget or two that you're going to walk out and go, wow, I was touched. I was inspired. I was educated. I was motivated. What was it for you? And Shivani, I want to turn it over to you in a moment if there's any questions that the panelists can answer. Please throw it out.
Yeah, well, thanks for a really great discussion. I think it was so engaging that no one had time to put questions in the chat. We have one that Pam kicked off. So I think what we'll do is do a show of hands, and I'll track the order that they're going up as best I can. We'll have Pam kick off with her question, and she's one of our board members. So if you want to ask the question directly, Pam, you can also say hello.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So when I think about vulnerability, the environment really is essential for you to be vulnerable and to take the risks and to, open yourself, as Sarah said, to be candid, and setting yourself with the values is fantastic. And when you don't have the choice of surrounding yourself with people with shared values, that just, can create the difficult moments. And my question was around the psychological safety, which are the principles that you're creating, or you're operating in an environment that allows you to be yourself, who you are, the way you are, and be accepted, and be able to bring your best self to deliver your highest potential at the job. And so I'm curious about psychological safety, and when you are vulnerable, the way you described it in your organizations, for any of the panelists, and particularly Jerry, it sounded like you really had your challenges in your workspace. What is it that you do to create that environment? Are there messages, principles, the way your organization trains its employees? What are your thoughts around psychological safety in order to be vulnerable and be successful?
I think with SFI, one thing that we do very, very well is that we have an open door policy. So I can have very open conversations with my vice president, the CEO, and she's been, like, I'll be honest, Kathy Abuso is huge on this movement of our DEIB work, and she's very intentional around the work that we do. And like, even example with the Journeys Guide, we didn't have funding for it in the beginning. She used her own money because that's how important it was to her. And so to have that kind of backing from a CEO and president of a company, that changes the way the conversation goes. And so I would say for me, it's definitely open door policy, same for my staff. I also make sure that our staff members know that we have EAP. For me, it's also finding other people in the industry that look like you, that can support you. I met some 2 great people today on this panel that are now going to be a part of my toolkit. But I think a lot of it is really just having open conversation and discussion. And bringing it back, like one of the things we did with our DEIB committee was that we have a representative in every pillar and they've been trained. So like anything that comes up, there is somebody that can have a conversation to support someone that may be having challenges at work. And so that's been very helpful for me as well. So it doesn't have to just fall on me or the chief sustainable officer. So that's been helpful.
So really top down, and it sounds like there's a major culture shift, and the commitment and the nurturing of that on a daily basis with resources was essential for you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great question, Pam. Thank you, Jerry. Keely, Sarah, anything to add to the question that Pam posed?
I think it's important that when we're thinking about the psychology around this particular topic, it's I think we've hit on it a couple times, which is the lens that people come from. There could always be this fallout. There's always that posing risk of potential fallout or disagreement, or not seeing eye to eye on a particular value system. And so the psychology for me is knowing that that's always a potentiality, and being that I'm not afraid of conflict. So that's the other thing too, is that when you are maybe timid of conflict, that could be another barrier of this kind of changing and shift of growth, because you're afraid that you might do something wrong, but yet you're not willing to make any effort to do anything at all, like be an ally for someone like me or Jerry or Lorenzo or anyone else. So I think it's also like the psychology and the fear that sometimes people may have around taking action or saying the wrong thing or being offensive. Well, I'm sure I've offended people, and if you take the time to communicate with me, I'd be more than happy to clarify my intention. But if no conversation ever happens because someone's afraid, that's a psychological barrier. And I feel like that's a common thing regardless of your background. So I would say definitely kind of working through the psychological fear that we may have around this particular topic.
Can I jump in real quick? Sarah, I like that you brought up confrontation, because we use that word in counseling and it's used a little bit different. So we use confrontation. So an example is like when I would have a client that did not look like me, probably wasn't comfortable for me to work with their kids, we would have the conversation right then. I am a Black woman. How do you feel about me being a Black counselor and your child is, whichever. And it honestly, having that conversation in the beginning, most of the parents were like, I don't want my child working with a Black counselor. By the end, they were like, wow, you actually asked? And like, it changes the view. So I think confrontation, I wanted to agree, like sometimes it's good. They're good confrontation, because I think sometimes when we say that word, people automatically assume a blow up, but we have to confront.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
I think conflict is not like, oftentimes maybe because I grew up in a violent community, right? So for me, confrontation, you can literally say whatever you want to say to me and it will not hurt my feelings until you punch me or hit me, right? Then we'll have a problem. So literally confrontation to me is not until you get physical with me. And so some people, though, in different cultures, confrontation could be a verbal confrontation or a difference of opinion, or no. Just being told no could be considered confrontational. That's an everyday experience in the Mexican household. my grandma's telling me no all the time still. Like, so, I mean, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think too, because of the community or the culture that I grew up in, and knowing that, hey, the first is to fight, not run away. So I deal with confrontation in any conflict, whether it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be cussing someone out or anything like that. And so I think that also acknowledging that confrontation is also good, because it brings a clear picture. You know, no gives direction.
Right. Beautiful. Keely, you want to jump in there?
One additional, so our core culture at GF Energy is we talk about trust, conflict, results. And so adding this results piece in, right, that if you don't have psychological safety and you can't have the hard conversations, you're not going to get to the best outcomes, right? And so this is what you're talking about, right? Like well-managed diverse teams actually end up getting the best results. So it's critical for organizational health and to be able to do what you need to do in the world to be able to have constructive conflict, and point out the things that aren't working and the ways people are not feeling heard and not feeling engaged, and how they're not being able to contribute fully. So trust, conflict, results is something that we kind of live and die by within our team.
Right. It's all in a matter of interpretation and definition, right? A lot of people, and I know this because I teach it, hold conflict as a bad thing. Right. So depending on the community you're in, conflict is just the way that we engage in conversations. Right. We're at the dinner table, we're animated. An outsider might think, oh my God, there's harm being done in that room. And then you pass the bread. Okay, are we done? Yes, let's move on. So conflict is it's conversation that hopefully puts you in alignment to where you want to go. But without conversation and dialogue, conflict then sits in a different context, right? It stops us or it limits us from asking those questions or showing up in a way that provides safety to the question that was asked earlier, right? So it's how we manage and engage in those dialogues that creates a path forward. So Shivani, any last questions out there before we finish up?
I think we're at time for wrapping up, and that was a great discussion. And like to think of carefrontation it's a good way to look at it.
Yes.
I'm a psych background also, so this is like my favorite intersection of conversation all the time. But thank you all. No, I think that's it on questions.
All right, beautiful.
Yeah.
Kirpa, I'm going to turn it back over to you, and I just want to everyone thank our panelists for these great meaningful discussions and conversations that were very heartful ones. So I'm in gratitude for all of you and for those of you listening, and hopefully you got one nugget from this conversation that, as Sarah said, we have to practice. So it's great if we hold it, but if we don't put it into practice, then it's just a nice, pretty conversation. So I encourage all of us to practice, fall down, get up, practice again, strengthen that mental, social, psychological muscle. So thank you all. All right, I'll turn it back over.
So much, everyone. Please join me once again in just thanking all the panelists, Sarah, Keely, Jerry, and our lovely moderator, Lorenzo, today for such a powerful discussion. We would like to extend our sincere thanks and appreciation to all the attendees who joined us for this panel discussion on fueling innovation in DEI. It was an insightful and thought-provoking session that offered valuable insights from experts in the field. The conversation explored how organizations can create an equitable working atmosphere that fosters collaboration, encourages creativity, supports diverse backgrounds, and promotes inclusivity. With greater awareness around these topics, businesses are better equipped to create a culture where everyone feels included and respected. We thank everyone who participated. Joey, can you please share the slides? Awesome. We have some upcoming events that we'd like to keep on your radar. Our next eCircle is March 17th. So we'd love to see you there if you're interested in our entrepreneurship efforts. We have our cleanup day, March 4th, which will be hosted in 4 different locations: Los Angeles, San Jose, Denver, and Phoenix. We have our reverse pitch event March 9th, which we're really excited about as well. March 23rd, we'll be having a panel discussion about sustainable healthcare. And April 6th, we have our book club, and this month's book is Speed and Scale by John Doerr. Next slide, please. Please make sure to check out our merch store. Please feel free to scan the QR. We do have some great merch, and all the proceeds do go back to our organization and efforts here at WCS. Next slide, please. Thank you to all of the volunteers who joined us today to make this event possible. The event organizers, Shivani, Anka, Serena, Julie, Joey, and our marketing leads, Tracy, Stephanie, and Joanna. This event would not happen without you, so I truly appreciate the time and dedication. And once again, thank you so much to our panelists and moderator. Please join us in our virtual world as well. We have a great social media, and we hope that you engage with us on whatever platform that you enjoy.